We have returned. Welcome to the news for the week of 9 August 2020. It was the week of Not DEF CON, and Not DEF CON 28 is actually, that's what I was calling it, Not DEF CON, is over. So they did have it, but it was, it wasn't like we were there or anything like that. So sad face, but the news rolls on. TikTok, Microsoft 0 days, Google bug bounties, Mercedes bugs, Kr00k revisited, Tor and 5G, well, maybe not. All this, and Jason Wood talks about how the cybersecurity skills gap is worsening.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Well, we're back, and this week in the news, Microsoft had 2 0 days patched this week that they are reporting as active in the wild. CVE 2020-1464, which was allowing people to bypass security features and basically pushing improperly signed files into the system, and a remote code execution, which was rated critical, CVE 2020-1380, which is a scripting engine problem that basically allows the attacker to acquire the same level of privilege as the current user. Those were patched last night for Windows 10, Windows 8.1, and a bunch of Windows Servers editions. So this is a big deal patch week, so be sure and get those taken care of. If not, if you woke up this morning and saw all your Windows machines had rebooted, that's probably a good thing. If you woke up this morning and they haven't rebooted, well, you might want to check out whether or not you have those updates, patching. Some evidence against the beleaguered TikTok app, finally. Apparently, the app collects unique identifiers on Android phones without the user's knowledge and can essentially, by using those unique identifiers, track users online by using an added layer of encryption to disguise that this is actually going on. And because this practice was banned by Android. ByteDance apparently says that they stopped doing this in November, and that was sort of what the evidence shows. But another new feature in iOS 14 that displays a banner if a mobile app is pasting from the clipboard. So this whole thing was about taking stuff off the clipboard and pasting it, and that helped them to track where people were or something like that. But basically, if it is doing that, iOS 14 then reveals that the app is doing it, and guess what? As of I think it was June, it was still doing that. TikTok has been repeatedly targeted by the United States government as a dangerous nation-state app. U.S. President Donald Trump issued an executive order which is attempting to prevent TikTok and WeChat, so that got included in the executive order even though they hadn't really talked about it before, from doing business in the United States within 45 days unless the apps are sold to a U.S. company. It remains to be seen if this is legal, enforceable, doable, but that's sort of where all that stuff is right now. It has long been known that even though Tor is supposedly anonymous, that various persons have been able to take control of Tor endpoints. So this has happened many times in the past. Somebody took control of one or more exit points in Tor. This basically increases the percentage likelihood that your data could be seen, but not by much. So if it's somebody takes control of a couple of Tor nodes, they can see some data, but the likelihood they can see a specific stream of data is not very high. But as the pandemic has forced Tor to lay off a lot of people over the last few months, and at one point in May, a person or a group ended up controlling more than 380 exit nodes in Tor. So when this was going on, your data had about a 24% chance to be using one of these controlled nodes. So the attack basically focused on then stripping HTTP to HTTPS redirects from web traffic, which would essentially remove that HTTPS encryption on that data flow and would allow them to see what was in the contents of the packet. It appears what they were trying to do was to see the Bitcoin addresses and then subsequently replace those addresses with their own address and redirect payments of the Bitcoin into their wallets. This was kind of what Frank Abagnale was doing back when he had, he would go around to banks and leave deposit slips for his account laying on all the deposit tables where people filled out their bank deposits. If you didn't pay attention, you just fill out the deposit and they'd put it in Frank's account. So it was an old con. The main attack occurred in May, but apparently this issue is still persistent, and Tor has not been able to recall all their staff. So there's that as well. Google paid out $10,000 for CVE 2020-6542, which was a bug found by Piotr Bania from Cisco Talos. This bug basically occurred in the OpenGL translation engine and was very easy to exploit for remote code execution. And it was a bug bounty. So they patched it in Chrome 84, so that's the current version of Chrome that came out. A lot of other bugs were also patched that resulted in bug bounties in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. So bug bounties apparently paying off for Google Chrome because they are generating lots and lots of findings, and they're subsequently fixing them. So that's a good thing. Due to our long relationship with SANS and SANS instructors, I couldn't resist the story about SANS. SANS reported, but I have a point that's not picking on SANS. SANS reported a security incident that apparently breached, wait for it, 28,000 records. Now, I realize that today, when somebody says 28,000, everybody looks at you and goes, million? Billion? But in reality, 28,000 is a really low number in the modern breach context. But it's SANS, so it makes the news. The breach was early in August, and it was discovered in an email audit, which ends up being my point. Apparently, a forwarding rule on a single user account was forwarding various basic information like last names and addresses and things like that in a total of 513 emails that got forwarded out of the SANS system. It didn't seem like, from what they reported, that any critical credit card data or anything really interesting was lost. But my point of the story is that audit works. And because they were auditing this email system, they actually found this breach before it did any real harm, and were able to limit this to 28,000 records, which I know that's still, there's always that 28,000, but today, if it was 28 million or 280 million, we would probably still just be going, yeah, that's probably not worth reporting. So because they caught it early in the audit, only limited amounts of information were lost, and that makes it a good news story, I guess. Black Hat happened in the first part of last week. Virtually, we were there, and there was a lot going on. It was busy as we were doing all kinds of little micro interviews and things like that. But one of the talks was about Kr00k. That's Kr00k if you don't remember. Kr00k was a flaw in Wi-Fi processor chips in the way that Wi-Fi chips were handling what they call the four-way handshake. And so the four-way Wi-Fi handshake is essentially how WPA2 gets established, and there was essentially a flaw in it. The flaw primarily allows the decryption of frames while they are in this process and they're still in the buffer, so that the Wi-Fi data can actually be extracted from there, cracked, and examined. So now this Kr00k vulnerability was originally discussed at RSA way back earlier in the year, because RSA, if you don't remember, was actually held live. So it was like one of the last conferences that got held this year. And they basically reported that it affected Broadcom and Cypress. But at Black Hat, the authors of this basically revealed that Qualcomm was also affected, and a new CVE was revealed. It was a CVE 2020-3702 was revealed at Black Hat. The talk also, so if you go look this talk up, they also had attached to it a testing script which would allow you to test your Wi-Fi devices to see if this chip vulnerability exists on those devices. So maybe worth checking that out. Another Black Hat talk revealed 19 security flaws in the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. All of those have been patched, mind you, by Mercedes. But the vulnerabilities allowed all kinds of different things to take place on the vehicle, which included unlocking the doors, turning the engine off, starting the engine, doing all kinds of things through this vulnerability. And that Black Hat talk was presented by Minrui Yan from SkyGo. I think almost every component of your life starts to become enabled by security, and you're going to have to find out a way to test all these things. So if you buy a new car, when it comes from the factory and it's full of holes, and you know that's going to be the case, you're going to want to know just what am I vulnerable to when I'm buying these vehicles. Maybe I'll become like a security life coach. That might be interesting. So, like, did you talk to your refrigerator today, Dan? It's really important that you talk to it every day, or it could go all howl on you. And your car hasn't heard from you in a couple of days. So you might want to give it some consoling words, just to be, friendly so that you don't get these problems any longer. Well, he's just back from the first successful nude ascent of Mount Kilimanjaro, and joining us is Jason Wood. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Doug. Boy, yeah, that was a cold trip.
Well, we won't comment on the photos, but
I appreciate that. So this week I found a post, a blog post written up by Threat Post, actually, on their blog, that I found a little bit interesting and a little bit distressing. And honestly, with my opinion on it is probably going to irritate some people, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it anyway. And it is on the, basically, they're talking about the skills gap for bringing in new security workers or cybersecurity workers, and the career path there that we have or may not have, or training that we may not have. And the part that I thought was interesting was kind of the view into what people thought made somebody qualified. And I use that in air quotes because what makes somebody qualified, depending on the job posting, varies wildly and gets absolutely stupid in some instances. But really, I mean, what the deal is that companies are complaining and saying, hey, we can't find people who have the skills needed for the open positions that we have. People are commenting on the fact that their career path is not going anywhere and that there's limited training opportunities. In fact, the article made a comment, a lack of training and career development opportunities to describe the situation. And this kind of brought me to the point where I got a little bit more annoyed and distressed at what was being said. And I guess at that line, there's a lack of training opportunities. And I looked at it and thought, well, that seems absurd to me. And I know folks will disagree with that probably, but I think there's a lot of training opportunities out there. But what I think where we run into issues is a lack of training opportunities that are acceptable to employers. That's a possibility, or something that job seekers themselves don't want. They want a particular boot camp or something like that paid for by somebody other than them, to allow them to get their CISSP or a pen testing certification or something like that. But really, I mean, if we look around, there's a lot of different opportunities out there for training in a number of different forms and price points and whatnot. And I was a little bit interested in the article because they really didn't talk about that at all that I saw. They talked about formal education and what the path is there, and how people evaluate that. And I looked at that and thought, well, I mean, in the U.S., I mean, we don't have a national program to foster new talent. I mean, we have universities that have cybersecurity or traditional computer science programs and whatnot. But those are going to vary quite a bit, and you have the added impact that, well, it's going to take 4 years or more, and it's going to cost a pretty good amount of money. And trying to do a university degree while you're trying to work is difficult, to say the least, as I did full-time school and full-time work for a while. That sucked. But so we have companies that are demanding those types of degrees, but also demanding certifications and industry and stuff like that. And we have other opportunities out there with boot camps and things like that that are really expensive. In fact, that's where I got my starting was boot camps and a lot of debt. But what I wanted to bring up as I was looking at this is, we do have a lot of opportunities for training out there. You've got training that's available on webcast for an hour to help you learn something for free. We've got training that starts off at $30-some a month. May not be the most ideal thing in the world, but allows us as practitioners in the security field to develop skills that we may not have at this point. Now, we do run into an issue where employers may not accept this type of training, and that becomes an issue, particularly when you get employers who are demanding, they want it's an entry-level position. They're expecting 6 months of experience in a CISSP, which you're not supposed to get unless you have, a certain amount of actual experience and prove that to the ISC squared. You also can't have requirements to have X years of experience, 5 years of experience in a technology that's 3 years old is a little bit of an issue. But there have been posts like that as well out there that I've run across. The issue is I'm looking at employers, and if you are in a position to influence job postings and what you're looking for in people, is to really go back or encourage people to go back and look at what they need for the experience in this role. Do you have this big shopping list that you decide that you arbitrarily need, or that somebody decides they arbitrarily need for a beginning service security person, or are there particular skills that are more important that they could have learned in something that is less formal, such as a certification program or a computer science degree? So go out there and do, I would encourage people to look at that and come up with job postings that are more reasonable and try and address that problem on the employer side. For those of us who are, for those who are looking for jobs, I'm not, but for those who are out there looking for jobs, look for opportunities to train yourself. Don't wait for an employer to come to you and say, hey, we want to send you off to this class, because employers can get kind of silly about this. I've heard people make comments like, I don't want to train people because then they'll leave and go get a better job, which I'm like, well, if you keep that attitude, yeah, they're going to leave. Don't worry about that. But, look for those opportunities to work on your own. Now, that involves some sacrifice on your part, time away from family or other things you'd rather be doing. Maybe are a little more fun and relaxing, but it's still part of maintaining our skill set. We're going to need to do that anyway, even if we have a formal degree. So pick out an area that you're interested in, look for options for training that cost nothing or next to nothing. And then to demonstrate that to an employer, blog about it, write code, tools, things like that. You could do videos online. You could do a number of different things to speak at conferences when we have conferences again, to get out there and demonstrate your expertise and make sure, make your background stand out a little bit more. Those are all things that we can do as practitioners to improve our backgrounds. And it doesn't require us to wait for an employer to say, hey, we're going to send you off to the $7,000 course over here, or we're going to pay for you to get a master's degree or something like that. There are absolutely issues out there that are driving this problem with this skills gap. I think the skills are out there. They can be developed. But what we're willing to accept as companies or employers is an issue, and maybe our own perceptions as practitioners as to what we're willing to accept as training opportunities are also an issue. So we need to look at that. Look at some things that are a little bit non-traditional and can build ourselves up. And I think we could start to make a little bit of a dent in this if we do this as a population and not wait for some company to give us permission to go out and improve ourselves in some way. So go take a look at that. If you want to check out the blog post, the link is in the show notes.
All right. Thanks, Jason. I'll add to that and say I think a lot of times companies are trying to do a one-size-fits-all kind of model, when they hire. And I've done consulting for companies where they just wanted me to come in and write job descriptions because it is a field that changes quickly and they don't really know. And that's where you get these wacky things like I've seen that same one you're talking about where it's like 6 months experience, but you need a CISSP. I've seen, really weird stuff where they're asking for some certification. And you're going, why would you need that certification to do this job? And there is a lot of problems with companies not accepting anything other than traditional approaches, which was why I've had tons of people come to me and say, I need to take a university class. So I can get that paid for, but I cannot go take a class at Sands. I can't go take a training class. And they can't even get reimbursed to take a Udemy class or something like that, even though it's super cheap, because they don't recognize that, or it has to go through some kind of vetting process or whatever. So there's a lot of complicated things there. So, if you need some of us to come write your job descriptions, say so. And
yeah, I mean, the job description thing, I've certainly seen it to where companies, places I worked, for example, they just didn't want to spend the time to think about it.
No,
so they just slap it together.
Yep, and it's just like they take the same job description they use for an accounting position, and they put, just change the header on it to cybersecurity, and then, people don't know. And I will also second your remark about a portfolio. When I've been interviewing people for different companies, that I love to see that when they come in and they show me what they've been doing, and they can show me code, they can show me apps they wrote, or they can say, just being able to point to a video blog, or better yet, use that old academic trick of saying, look at all the places I presented. I really, when you said that, I was like, I really like that idea. That's something academics have done since the dark ages of, that's how you verify your credentials, is saying, look, I spoke here and I was asked to speak at this and I had a presentation. And it's very quick and easy to see what somebody's doing. They've got their black hat presentations and their RSA presentations and things. Really like that. Great suggestion. So thanks, Jason. Finally, just when you thought 5G was going to be used to embed a micro Bill Gates into your brain, it's obsolete. Well, maybe not. Researchers at Nanyang Tech in Singapore published a paper in Nature Photonics. I'm sure we all subscribe to that, right? That demonstrated a terahertz wave in their new chip design that could push data at 11 gigabits. So that speed, 11 gigabits would allow real-time streaming of 4K on wireless devices, which means, wow. I mean, that's a big deal. And so 5G technology has a theoretical limit of 10 gigabits. And that doesn't include like secret messages and Mexican radio stations that come in on the fillings in your teeth and all that other stuff that people keep writing about 5G. But since we're still seeing the rollout of 5G and there are other issues in the infrastructure, the chip's probably not going to be, in a phone this year, and it's probably not going to obsolete 5G before it even gets off the ground. But who knows? It was an interesting article. It was actually from last week, but I saw that terahertz chip and I couldn't resist. And that is the news for now in the time of plague. I'm Doug White. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back on Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up. So in the meantime, avoid conspiracy theories. Read the science. Bye.